The following is a presentation of the Match Talk Podcast Network. It's time for Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. We'll talk all things Hokie wrestling with Coach Kevin Dresser and his staff. Now, let's join your host, three-time National Wrestling Writer and Broadcaster of the Year, Jason Bryant.
And welcome back to Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. Jason Bryant here, back in the not-so-warm but very friendly confines of my studio here in Minnesota. Virginia Tech's Kevin Dresser with us. You're basically back in Blacksburg because that's kind of where you guys live. That's what you do. And it's a 5-hour trek back from the Hampton Coliseum where you guys finished up 4-0, moved to 11-1 this year, winning your third Virginia Duels National College Division Championship. Wasn't exactly smooth sailing, as we talked about a little bit post-match, but this was a good performance from Tech. We talked about how it's a lot different experience than it was a year ago, and let's just start with that. Last year, you were licking your wounds with a walking wounded team that finished second. Now, going into the stretch run of the ACC tournament, fairly healthy with save a few things.
Yeah, well, first off, Jason, it's in the low 60s here today in Blacksburg, so... No, I'm just saying that that's my recruiting pitch. It's always in the low 60s here in January in Blacksburg. But no, seriously, it is. We've got a couple of really good warm days, so we've got a couple home dual meets, and I know we'll talk about that. But I'm already doing my promoting for the weekend and getting Castle full. But backing up to your question on the past weekend, and just obviously it's nice winning, and we didn't win the year before. It's nice winning, and I think we did talk a little bit post match, and that. Obviously on Saturday, North Dakota State came out ready to rock, and, they took it to us in terms of effort and just getting after us. And we had some guys kind of towards the end of our lineup that recognized that, but we didn't recognize that very good early. So it was a good wake-up call for us. I think we were a little bit more ready to go on Saturday night against Oklahoma. But, you go wrestle those to learn, and we didn't have a lot of as much competition on Friday, and so you can't get complacent, and that was the message that we talked about this week. That we've got Pitt on Friday, we got UVA on Sunday, and we got to worry about Pitt, and we got to be ready to go because we know they're going to come out and try to get us, and the same thing happens on Sunday. So we're a little complacent and a little bit not really ready to fight on Saturday morning. But again, give credit to North Dakota State because they came out and wrestled us hard.
Now, prior to the event, you had said you'd like to have seen North Dakota State, and that mainly was 125 to see Joey Dance get a shot at Josh Rodriguez. But this is an opponent that Joey's had success over numerous times. But was there something about this year's matchup that you know what, I really think Joey needs to get this kind of test? Because Rodriguez has been wrestling really well. He hadn't been tested a whole lot, but he showed up and definitely gave Joey Dance a battle at 125.
He did, and he's had a great season, and so we really were excited for that matchup to happen, and so it happened, and I felt Joey did probably maybe the best job he's done against him. They've wrestled numerous times, and Joey's always won, but there's been some overtimes and some nail biters, and so I felt like he separated himself a little bit, not to the degree that I think we have to. If we get him again, I think we got to go try to win that match by 4 or 5 points, and what did he win by 2 this time? So that guy's a formidable opponent, and he's had a really good year, and I think he's a guy that could make a long run in the NCAA tournament. So it was it was a matchup we wanted, and it's progress for Joey. And I think overall for the weekend, he was named ACC Wrestler of the Week. Not that means a lot, but I think it's a reflection of a pretty good weekend.
Another good weekend was by Ty Walls, who, unbeknownst to many in Blacksburg, was the cover boy for the Virginia Duels program. I'm not sure who designed it. Maybe some guy from Pocosin that may be talking to you right now. But, Ty had a good weekend, dominant. Had a little bit of a wild match with Thomas Haynes from Lock Haven, which saw 23 points scored in the third period between the two. But, Ty's putting points on the board and still being dominant.
Well, Ty's a scoring machine right now, and people that follow wrestling know that staying a scoring machine and being a heavyweight usually don't go together. But they definitely are with Ty. We updated our statistics for our team just because we do that, and it's fun, and we give out awards at the end of the year. And right now, Ty's at 99 takedowns for the season. and I think he's trying to get Devin Carter's 160 or 170 takedown record for the season. So, but on the real side of it is he is putting up a lot of points. I think he got caught on his back. Haynes is a tough kid and got caught on his back, gave up some back points, but he still, I think, scored 25. When you win 25-15 or something, that's not your typical heavyweight match, but it's pretty obvious Ty Walls isn't typical. He just really, for a guy to be a two-time All-American, to me, maybe one of your most improved guys in the team, that says a lot about him.
Had some lineup shifts, and one of those was Dennis Gustafson going down to 133 and inserted Kevin Nordstrom at 141 pounds. He ends up getting hurt against Lockhaven. Then you were adamant before the tournament saying David McFadden's red shirt is staying on. So let's first start with Gus and his performance at 133. Still getting his legs under him at the weight class, or is it just something that he's got to get it focused between the ears?
I think it's a little of both. I think I think Dennis was the match he lost. He looked really good for the weekend overall, but the match that he lost on Saturday morning, I think, was kind of what we were talking about as our team, was that he just wasn't ready to go. He wasn't the typical Dennis. He didn't go out and make a lot of attempts and try to overwhelm him, which is what he needs to do and which is what he's about. So it was probably I hope a wake up call for him. He's going to have a tough weekend. He's got 4 he's tomorrow night, and that's a tough guy from Pitt. And so, but I see progress. I see better focus out of Dennis than I've ever seen. I like what I see in the room right now. So I think we're just going to get better every week there.
And Nordstrom 141 coming off the victory at F&M with the Open, looking good, and then all of a sudden have this type of injury. Okay, how serious is the injury, and how long do you think he'll be out?
I'm not sure exactly. He was really sore, obviously, and there's nothing fractured in there. So it's just a matter of getting over the soreness and getting movement back in it. He's been working out. He's maybe this weekend. We hope to get him in sooner than later. Yeah, it's frustrating for him because he obviously wasn't ready to go again against North Dakota State, whether it was just being back in the lineup again and not being used to the weigh-in or just not going out and getting after it. I don't think he made enough happen. So it was frustrating that he didn't win that match. But I do see that we still have a shot at 141 if we get healthy there, or when we get healthy. It's not a matter if we get healthy; it's when we get healthy. So, I still like the guy. I really think that his head's on straight right now. He's obviously disappointed because he was just kind of starting to make a run, but that's sports and that's wrestling, and you got to figure out how to wrestle around stuff like that. So. We're going to do the right thing for him. There's no gun to our head here. We're going to see how he feels, and we'll make a call about this weekend. And then if we don't go this weekend, we'll see about next weekend.
And again, we talked about Dave McFadden beforehand after we finished up with our previous episodes. So go ahead and say it. He's keeping the red shirt on. Is that's something you're going to have to do a weekly update for some of Hokie Nation now to say, yep, he's still staying on?
Well, that might be. That's a good way, Jason, to look at it, because I still get a lot of questions. We had a press conference here last night on our side of things, media-wise, and there was a lot of local news folks there, and that question came up, and I'll give the same answer, and is I have to look into the athlete's eyes and know that he's ready to go, and so this, I consult a lot of people, but at the end of the day, I have to make a call, and just based on everything that I see and kind of how fresh the recovery is, I don't think, in talking with David, I just don't think it's the best thing right now. I do think I think the exciting part of it is I think that guy, as he gets healthier, I think he's special, and I think he can win multiple times. I really do that. I do say that, and I haven't said that about many guys. I think he's got that factor in there that, if he progresses in the room, he has to progress in the room. He competes like nobody's business, but he's got to compete in the room. And as he competes in the room better, I think we're going to see a guy that could really score some points for us. So I know everybody's all fired up that, this is the year and this is the year and, all hands on deck. But, I don't know if you want all hands on deck if they're not 100% hands. And my thought is I plan on contending every year. For Virginia Tech plans on contending every year. So sooner or later, we're going to get those guys points. I'll just leave it at that. We're going to get that guy's points sooner or later.
So coming back from Hampton, I just got to know how much seafood did you indulge in? Because the hospitality room, best in the country, and I recall that this year seemed to be much more quality and frequency there this year. It's like, wow, they're really they're up in their game, which was already pretty good.
I made sure that I hit lunch there every day in the hospitality room. I think I even snuck in 5:30 dinner. So yeah, those guys know what they're doing out there. Gosh.
Yeah, it's to the point where my dad comes up, and I don't get to spend a lot of time with my family when I go down there. My dad comes up just for that dinner. So, it's that good. When my dad, who's doesn't do a whole lot with wrestling, he'll come up every year, watch Pocosin wrestle if they're wrestling, and said, all right, let's go get that dinner. And it's 5:30, and the place is wall-to-wall people. So, and my dad's a seafood guy, so he knows it.
My dad's no longer around, but if he was in town, he went to a lot of wrestling matches. The hospitality room was one of his hot spots too. He would have. He's been to the Virginia Duels many times. So I think over the years, a lot of people can give good testimony to that place.
Now moving on, we've got Pitt and Virginia coming in conference action. Pittsburgh ranked number 23. Virginia just fell out of the top 25, but as you alluded to with Dom Forey's at 133 with Pittsburgh, and Virginia has a couple of landmines with Jack Mueller at 125, George DiCamillo at 141, and just solid guys up and down the lineup for each team. This is a situation you got to be careful about finding a trap match here because these one match in a dual meet can affect the way things go, and how are you trying to keep the guys focused for Pitt on Friday and Virginia on Sunday?
Consistency is what it's all about as we get closer to the end. So it's about improvement and consistency, and when you make that improvement, then you got to keep that consistency with that improvement. So we can't be good one weekend and not ready to go the next weekend. And like I said, we weren't quite ready to go Saturday morning, so we have to learn from that, and we got to be ready to go because, again, we're the favorite, and everybody wants to take our head off, and we got to take that personal, and we got to be ready to take their head off, and that might sound barbaric, but that's the nature of our sport, and we got to be ready to go, and I think we'll be ready to go. We've had a great week of practice, and we're at home, so I think there's a little excitement. We've been on the road since we went to UNI in Missouri. That's a long time ago. We've been on the road for that long, so I think everybody's really ready to get back and wrestle here in Blacksburg.
What's the difference in coaching mentality when you've got a team now that, you went from building to all of a sudden winning a trophy, and now people look at it, okay, well, the building part is done. Now it's just solidifying the structure. Is there a change in coaching when you've reached that point to where, like, okay, every time out, we're the hunted?
Well, I think it is a little bit of a coaching thing. Yeah, I think, as a coach, you've got to make your you got to make your athletes aware and prepared. And so technically we try to keep them prepared and aware for certain situations, kind of per individual we compete against. As a team philosophy, mentally, we talk about it a lot, and I know I talk about it a lot, is that we have to understand that we're going to get everybody's best effort, which we probably didn't get 5-6 years ago, but especially as we've progressed and kind of stayed in the top 5 and the top 10 all the time. Everybody's knows when they come here they got to be ready. So we're getting their best effort, and we got to match that intensity. And for the most part, we've done pretty good at that. Obviously, there's times that's easier said than done. You not only do you see it in wrestling, but you see it in football, Division I football, Division I basketball. That you got to be up every time, and so we get 2 opportunities this weekend.
The common saying is act like you've been there before. What's it like to coach a team that hasn't been there before, and how that impacts their performance?
Well, I think last year we made a big step, and our backs were against the wall in New York City, and we had a really rough Friday morning. And I think our team as a whole grew up a lot. Friday afternoon and Friday night, we rock and rolled, and when our back was up against the wall, and so we performed in a pressure situation. Across the board, pretty much everybody did, and I think we learned a lot from that, and I think we saw something in ourselves that maybe other people didn't see, and so now I think we're doing a pretty good job of keeping the bar at that level, and we need to bump it up again, and so it's not like we approach this like, hey, we got something to protect or something to hide or something to hang on to here. It's like, okay, 4th was nice, but we got to bust it up, and we got to, we want to compete for the gold one this year.
And just to give the fans the update, Friday, January 12th, hosting Pitt at 7 p.m. at Castle, Corps of Cadets Appreciation and Military Appreciation Day. That one also streamed live on Hokie Vision if you can't get to Castle. Sunday, January 22nd, against the Cavaliers of the University of Virginia. That one on ACC Network Extra. Probably going to find that one on ESPN3 if I'm not mistaken. That is Hokie Club giveaway and the Takedown Foam Finger giveaway. That's always a fun one. So you can go Larry Moe and Curly poking people's eyes out and Signal 2 at the same time.
Absolutely. They got a lot of stuff going on this weekend. I know that much. There's a lot of we're going camo singlets on Friday night, and then Virginia Tech. You don't have to really, if you're from the state of Virginia, that everybody will show up for that. So we're really looking forward to just getting, like I said, getting back home, and today's our day off. Today we train Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and so the whole team, all 30 guys are off today to get their bodies ready to go, and we'll see what happens.
I'm going to switch gears here as it relates to the end of the season. The last regular season duel at home is February 12th against a very, very tough South Dakota State team. But then the spot on the schedule is open February 19th, and that's the national duels, and that's what led to a lot of controversy last year. So let's just start with the first part of it is you and I were talking about the future of the Virginia duels off air, and I've been talking to a number of coaches about it, and the Big Ten schedule the way it has basically scheduled their 14 programs through the weekend. So we as a staff at the Virginia duels, and again, we're all volunteers, myself, Mike McCormick, Bill Grubbs, John Sports have all been, we struggle to get the Division I field loaded again. That's where we've gone to this 12-team pool format to maximize the duels for the teams that attend. But we're looking at, is it wise for us to change the date, or is it, what's going to have to happen? I mean, what's your opinion on what the Virginia duels to us we can do to beef this thing back up without making any wholesale changes, like maybe moving it into December, which could affect the entire the landscape of the event, because this is something that the national duels grew out of the Virginia duels, and it's been a good event for a long time. It's just lacking those 14 opportunities from the Big Ten limits some teams coming in. And what do you think wrestling community should do about beefing this tournament back up?
Well, I think it's a great event, and what was it, the 37th year, and then it's evolved from being the national championship event years ago to kind of being a really good 2-day event for the colleges that can make it happen. Obviously, the Big Ten schedule knocks the Big Ten teams out. So I think moving it would probably I haven't done a lot of research on it, but I think moving it, because there's so many people, high school and college, that are used to it and already kind of mentally pencil that in, I don't think that's a great idea personally. I know it'd be hard for us to get there at any other time because we've kind of put that in our schedule. So I think, and I mentioned this to you, I think the thing to do is to go out and find the top non-Big Ten teams, and again, everything's about raising money and taking money and getting the right teams there. I think that's attractive too from everybody's standpoint. I think the fans like to see that. So let's throw out the Big Ten teams because they're all booked up. There's still another 55, 60 teams in the nation, and I think if you can make some type of a financial incentive to get maybe 4 of the best teams out there, I think other teams will follow personally. And but I think it's something you got to get on early because we are already starting scheduling for next year. So I think if you want to try to grab the Oklahoma States and the Missouris and the Cornells of the world, and there's people I'm leaving out that are doing just as good of a job, I think you got to get on it early. And I think if you do that, I think that it could grow. I mean, we still love the format, and it's very valuable for us just to go the way that it's went the last couple of years. Getting 2 matches on Friday and 2 matches on Saturday is in multiple day weigh-ins is a really good thing for our team to prepare as we go towards the end of the year. So trust me, I'm not complaining about it. But if you want to make it better and you want to get a little more sizzle to it, I think that's what you do. Is you try to get in Oklahoma State, and I think if you're going to do that, you got to get them in early.
Yeah, because the way we're spitballing it with 8 conferences the way there are, so that leaves 7 conferences left over. So hypothetically, you take the top 2 from each conference, plus you get your Virginia team. ODU's always going to be there, even if they're not the second best team in the MAC in a given year. So that leaves you 1. But it's just I know tracking down 16 has been a real problem because I'd like to go back to the bracket because that's the true sense of the advancement format. But that's one thing. The national duels grew out of this, and now the national duels in its current form Not necessarily the biggest thing Tech fans circle on their calendar after what happened last year. But if I look at this correctly, and just to break it down and start doing some of that bracketology like the wrestling, like the basketball people do. So the theory is this year, the highest rated Big Ten teams in order will go to the conference champions / highest rated team. In that case, the Pac-12 is not participating based on the time of their conference tournament. And I believe Minnesota and Illinois have opted out from the Big Ten. So that still leaves plenty of opportunity. So on paper, if we were to do it right now, just based on rankings and conference championships, and I'm making some assumptions here, but Penn State would be at Oklahoma State. Makes sense. They would be 1-2, barring the match that's coming Friday with Iowa and Penn State. We haven't even touched on that. Now, this is where it sorts out again, where Iowa's ranked 3rd. Virginia Tech would be ranked 5th. The highest Big Ten team after Penn State would be Iowa. Heading to Castle, that's something I know you would like. Ohio State at Lehigh, Nebraska at Missouri. This is where we get into wild cards. NC State would probably be ACC 2, providing you guys win the championship. In that regard, Rutgers at NC State. Michigan would then bump up and at Cornell, which would probably be the wild card, the second wild card, number 2 from the IWA. Wisconsin and Appalachian State. And I'm assuming either Purdue or Indiana at Rider / Edinburgh. So that's how I think I've got it on paper right now. Iowa at Virginia Tech is something that might get Hokie fans excited about in Castle February 19th.
Yeah, that would get them excited. I think that the chances of that happen are probably the same chances of me getting 4 years of college eligibility again. I think that's about the same chance of that happening. So I don't want to get started because last year when I got started, I went a little nuts and got in trouble and got myself in trouble and created a stir. But so I'm not ready to go there and do that yet. I just know, obviously I'm a little bit more educated on the way they're doing things, and basically after the first 2 teams, I think it's safe to say that they can pretty much shuffle the deck any way they want to shuffle the deck. I think after the first 2 teams, obviously if Penn State and Ohio State or Oklahoma State keep doing what they're doing, if they end up going undefeated and they're the 2 teams, then those 2 will wrestle each other. If Ohio State beats Penn State and Iowa, then Ohio State will go to Stillwater. After that, I think it's, I think that, I'm not saying this totally in a negative way, but I think the politics takes over, and they can put teams together regionally. My thing is that it just wasn't sold to us when we started it this way 2 years ago. It wasn't really sold to us this way. So it was sold to us that is pretty cut and dry. To me, it's really simple. The top Big Ten team wrestles the top non-Big Ten team. The second place Big Ten team wrestles the second place non-Big Ten team, and you go down 8 times. You do that 8 times, and it's really simple. And I think simple is the way it was sold to us. And the coaches at that particular time 2 years ago, and at the convention, were all about that. Well, obviously, things started to change for regional reasons, and people pulled out. And the one thing is, I do feel. I don't want to say bad, but I do get it. I mean, the NWCA, Mike Moyer does an unbelievable job, and for what he's given, and when I say what he's given is he's not given any authority. If a team doesn't want to do something, there's nothing that binds us at Virginia Tech. I mean, probably technically in theory, if we decided on February 1st that we didn't want to host, we probably wouldn't even have to host. I mean, there's nothing there that's binding. Really binding for an institution because the NWCA doesn't have any power over any of the colleges as to who goes and who hasn't gone, and that's really been the one thing at the coaches convention that over years and years and years, as we've tried to agree on one particular system or one model, and we've never been able to agree on that. So the only way that's ever going to work, and there are legs to this right now, is that the NCAA does have the national dual meet component back on the table that everybody's going to have to participate in, because points will carry forward to the individual tournament from the national duals tournament. And so that's back on the table, and the NCAA is pushing it. And really, to be quite honest, if the NCAA gets it, that's really what needs to happen, because the coaches, everybody's got their own agendas, and I'm not saying we're any different. Everybody's got their own agendas, and so you're never going to get the coaches to agree. You could put the best model out there, and nobody's ever going to agree, because certain schools don't want to come to certain schools, and I think we've seen examples of that. But if the NCAA steps in, you got to go. Otherwise, you're not getting your points to go to the nationals. then it's a good thing. And more importantly than that is, I just think the dual meet concept is awesome, and I think really most college coaches like the dual meet concept. And they did a really interesting study over the last 10 years, and they provided the results of that study last year at our convention in Florida in August. And that study showed they tallied the teams that placed in the top 20 in the nation, and then actually what happened, and then they put a hypothetical together if they would have ran a dual meet tournament based on the dual meet rankings, how it would have shaken out. And I think there wouldn't have been any difference in the champions. I don't even think there was any difference in the second places. Now, when you got the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, one year, by involving the dual meet component, it might have been a change between a third and a fourth and a third, if you see what I'm saying. But it really wasn't that big of a difference. So it'll be interesting to see how much. I know that I've talked to some coaches, 3 or 4 coaches that are really, really pushing that right now again. So I think we're going to see that back on the table in August when we get to the convention. I think the NCAA is really, really wants to make that dual meet component happen, and so then we'll have a true dual meet thing, and everybody's got to show up, and nobody can spin their webs. Everybody's got to show up, and I think it'll be good for wrestling. I really do.
As far as the timing on this, that's one thing people worry about is impacting the end of the year, because we've got a gem in March. We saw it at Madison Square Garden. We see it every March, that they don't want to take away from the quality or what that tournament means. The problem, I think, with the national duels in putting it later in the year is I think it's a just one, is that the power teams are going to go through the grinder, whereas the teams that aren't necessarily involved are going to be a little fresher. It almost basically sticks to teams that have the advantage to start with. It knocks them down a peg, and where they might be somewhat disadvantaged. What's the key on the timing for a dual meet championship? I mean, there's been people saying, hey, why don't we just put it back at the Virginia duels? And first of all, I'm not going to complain about that one bit.
No, I think you've got to do it and make sure that the athletes are properly rested. But if you do it over one weekend, at the very most 2 weekends, I think it could work, because you just have to start your dual meet season a little bit earlier, and so you do have time to build a weekend off before you go to that. And so I think I think you could do that, do it, and and I just think I'm kind of like Tom Ryan. Tom Ryan says it all the time. He says we need to make the dual meet relevant, and it needs to really mean something. And I think it is in certain situations. I really do think it is. I mean, obviously winning. I'm sure all the Big Ten teams think that winning the dual meet championship in the Big Ten is a feather in your hat, and it really is, because there's so many great programs and great coaches in the Big Ten. So I'm sure that is, but. The part that I think is frustrating to the fans is the current model we got out there right now is we as coaches and even the fans were sold something, and then at the end you get the 2 top teams, but everybody else, they're not saying, well, those really don't matter. It does kind of matter if I think the fans would like to see the second best team wrestle the second best team that's not a Big Ten team. I think the fans would like to see the third versus the third, and it seems simple to me. But, really what it's going to come down to is agendas and maybe geography, and, I don't know, but that's what it's going to come down to. But all I know is that we flew out to Oregon one year to help the national duels. That was definitely not convenient. We had a regional event in Columbus we could have went to, but they sent us out to Oregon, and we did it. And so I think that, I think they could do. I think they just have to put their foot down a little bit better at the end of the year, and I think if they do that, then if somebody decides they don't want to go, then I think it's on them. But I just don't like making accommodations for some and not for others. And some people say, well, it's always been that way. Well, it doesn't have to always be that way. I don't feel like it does. So hopefully that's a much kinder, gentler version of Coach Dresser this year than last year, if you know what I mean, Jason.
Well, without throwing the rock back into the pond to create some ripples, I'm just kind of curious to know how quickly do you think that the attendance record at Castle would be shattered for wrestling if Iowa was to come to town?
Oh, I think so. I think it'd be good. I think it's a good human interest, and I think it's good for wrestling. I mean, look at Penn State's coming, and they're gonna, Carver Hawkeye's gonna be rocking and rolling, because you got 2 teams, whether it's you have 2 really good teams, you have 2 teams that don't like each other, or whatever the case, it's good for the fans and it's good for the sport. And look at the match in Stillwater, how good that was. And I think it would be good for wrestling to get 2 good teams together, and if there's a little storyline behind it that draws a few more thousand fans. What the heck, we should look at MMA. Why do you think they sell out tickets and sell out places and everything? Because you get two guys talking smack to each other, and all of a sudden Dana White gets richer and richer, and the sport grows and the sport grows and the sport grows. And I think that's what's the thing that's unfortunate is that we got opportunities here for whatever reason, storylines, just two good teams wrestling, and because people have reasons or whatever, then we don't let those happen. And I think that to me it's just all about making the sport grow. Whether we get Nebraska coming here, or whether we get Iowa, or whether we get whoever we got coming here, we got to win first, right? So I'm not putting the cart in front of the horse. We got to win. But whether it's us or NC State or whoever, I can tell you this: whatever ACC school gets a chance to get a Big Ten school to come on their campus, it's gonna break their attendance record. It's gonna up their attendance record, no matter if we get, if we were to get Penn State, Ohio State, Iowa, Nebraska, we're going to have a lot of fans show up because those are all quality programs. And there's probably, Michigan. I'm not slighting anybody, at all. Ohio State.
Again, the Hokies next in action Friday, January 27 p.m. at Castle, and on Sunday, 4 p.m., January 22nd against Virginia. So for Kevin Dresser, this is Jason Bryanson. Thanks for listening for the latest episode and news and things and stuff and seafood updates and weather from Blacksburg. Check it out at InsideVirginiaTechWrestling.com. Thanks for listening again.
This show is part of the Mat Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MatTalkOnline.com.